Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to another episode of Sree's daily global COVID-19 show. My name is Sree Sreenivasan, and I'm the Marshall Loeb Visiting Professor of Digital Innovation at Stony Brook School of Journalism. The show is brought to you in partnership with Scroll.in, one of India's leading news and culture websites. This is the 88th episode of this show, which means we've been on lockdown in New York for 88 straight days. And we've been here every single day trying to understand what's been happening with the global pandemic. And now, in recent days, we are trying to understand three crises: the health, financial, and racial inequality crises in America. We want to get your ideas for guests and themes. Please email me, sree@sree.net. Today, we have a very special episode. Every Sunday, we do Positivity Night. And the question was, can we do positivity in the middle of a pandemic, and especially in the middle of everything happening right now? And we have the perfect person to help us talk through these issues. You'll be meeting Antonio Neves, who is author and leadership speaker. He's the host of the Best Thing podcast. Find it now on your favorite podcasting platform, and author of the forthcoming Stop Living on Autopilot. I originally wanted to call this A Student Teaches the Professor, because he was my student at Columbia Journalism School, and you'll meet him in just a minute. Hi, folks. Thank you for being here. Please tell us where you're watching from. Please hit share, and please tag your friends. We're live right now on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, and on LinkedIn. And we want all the people watching, including our guest, to share on those platforms. So everyone, please do that when you get a chance. We are just honored that you would all be with us, and so grateful to you for your time as we go for this 88th show. We have several people watching from around the world, and we want to hear from you. But first, we want to make sure that we can pay our bills, and so we are going to thank our sponsors. First, Art & Co. Get involved in the world's largest online art auction, fundraising for COVID-19 victims. artandco.net, artandco.net. They're helping COVID-19 victims through multiple charities and 31 independent artists who will benefit. So please check out artandco.net. And even if you're not the art buying kind, we all know somebody who is. Please tell them to go here, take a photo, hit share, or take a screenshot and share that, please. And we also want to thank our sponsors at Muckrack Academy. Muckrack Academy is helping me do fundamentals of social media, a free certification course that goes live in 2 weeks, mrac.co/social. This is for everyone of any age, any background, any experience, any profession, even though it says journalists, because everyone needs communication help. It's a free certification course, goes live in 2 weeks, mrac.co/social, mrac.co/social. 3,500 people around the world have already signed up, and you should too, mrac.co/social. And now I'm ready to meet Antonio. I hope you are as well. We're very excited to bring onto the screen right now Antonio Neves, who I've known for so many years, who is an upbeat, positive person. And tonight, he's going to help us think about how we can be upbeat and positive, even with everything going on. The three crises, as we said, the health crisis, the financial crisis, and the racial inequality crisis in America. So now, please welcome Antonio Neves.
Hey, good evening. How you doing, Sree?
Good afternoon to you, right? You're in LA, we're out here in New York. It's 9 p.m. I know it's dinner time with the kids and 6 p.m. out there. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for talking to us today. We are honored that you would spend some time with us. We have so much to talk about. I asked you when we were thinking about this, whether this is the right time. Can we do positivity? And you said yes.
Absolutely. First and foremost, let me just take a moment to acknowledge you. At the top of this, Sree, you said 88 days. When a lot of people find excuses not to hit record and they hit pause, they push pause during times like these. And one thing is obvious, you've chosen to lean in during this time and to support the community, to educate the community, to bring on an amazing array of leaders. So I just want to acknowledge you for what you're doing. You mentioned positivity. I mean, if there's a time for positivity, it's right now. And it's not that Pollyannish positivity, but I think there are some key things that we can do. And you mentioned being away from the kids right now during dinner time here in Southern California. The truth is we have 4-year-old twins, and this is a nice little break. So I'm okay with that.
I appreciate that. My twins were 4 yesterday. Today they're 17, and today they took me out to a protest march, and led us through that protest march. And in a way, it just I miss them when they were 4, but I appreciate them now. I wouldn't want to be 17, turning 17 as they did in the middle of this pandemic, locked in with their parents. I wouldn't recommend that for anyone, but they've been wonderful. I wrote about it in my newsletter today. If you didn't receive my newsletter, that means you're not on my newsletter list. Please do follow me, or please email me, Sree@Sree.net, and ask to go on the newsletter, and we'll send it to you. We've also tweeted that so you can see it. Antonio, I start everything by asking about families and how you are in the middle of all of this and all the pain we're experiencing. So if you wouldn't mind starting there.
Yeah, I appreciate you for asking. I'm really fortunate that my wife and our 2 kids, everyone in my immediate family is healthy. We're doing well. Like many people across the country, I do have concerns. I have a father who's over 80 years old with dementia and not in the best health. And he's living in a nursing home that's been on lockdown in Kentucky for a few months now. So I've been unable to visit and see him. So my mind is regularly on my father in that nursing home. And as you know, we saw the news coming out of many nursing homes across the country and the deaths that have happened there. My mother equally is someone that is at risk right now. She's has COPD, something that affects the lungs, and God forbid something happened to her. That'd break my heart. So as much as my wife and my kids are well, I'm regularly thinking about my mother. I'm regularly thinking about my father and their health, and the health of so many people out there who have these underlying conditions. And just briefly, Sree, it's so funny when we hear about these deaths, we regularly hear the question, do they have an underlying condition? What we don't realize is most Americans have an underlying condition, like all of us. It's not like we're all just a picture of perfect health. A lot of people have these, so I don't want to take it for granted what someone may be experiencing and going through. But again, thoughts are with my mother and father, and really blessed that everyone's okay.
And how has it been? Well, first of all, I'm so sorry about your dad and about your mom's situation, but really your dad in that nursing home is going to be so difficult. And so many people are in this generation, in our generation, are learning about dementia and how it affects older people and how it robs them of their final years. It is really sad, and I know it must be painful for you. So one more dimension to everything that's going on and makes it so difficult. I just saw the news about a few minutes ago that the city of Minneapolis has announced that the city council has a veto-proof plan to disband the police department and to rethink how it comes together. They said, we're not just going to glue it back together. We're going to think of a whole new thing. I don't know if you've seen this news yet. How are you reacting to everything going on as an African-American man in the middle of all of this? I know it can't be easy, so I would appreciate anything you can share about this.
Yeah, I'm in a unique situation, and I think the question you ask is ritually layered. First and foremost, when all this has gone down, not just with George Floyd, not with Ahmaud Arbery, not with Breonna Taylor, we can go on and on and on. And that's the unfortunate thing, is that we can go on and on and on. Something about this happening right now during the pandemic, Sree, I believe has just been something extra. We already were going through a challenging time with the pandemic, a global pandemic, and then this happened, and people just basically were at their wits' end and said enough is enough. And personally, in the midst of all this, I felt frayed. In many ways, I've kind of felt like a piece of yarn that's slowly being unwound. I mean, there's been anger, there's been sadness, so many different emotions. And you just want to go outside and yell, and you want to say, why don't you understand what's happening? And as we all know, Sree, this isn't brand new. Many of these things are systematic. They've been in our institutions for a long time, but now we're seeing these things due to videotape. So my heart is breaking for so many people that experience this on a regular basis. I also find myself in a unique situation as well, Sree. I lived in New York City for over 12 years. I had the opportunity to meet you there way back in 2005, which seems like eons ago. And now I live in Southern California, and I'm a black guy that has a white wife and 2 biracial kids. and being in a household with that. They're 4 years old, so there's not like a lot of explaining I can do to them at this age, but it's just a great reminder of the responsibility that we have parents have in our own households and the conversations that we have to raise these young men, to raise these young women, not only to be aware of what's going on, but also to know about their rights, to know about what's right, what's wrong, and also what they can do to call for action to spark positive change. You mentioned earlier that your 17-year-old twins, they got you out for a protest today to do some real-time activism. And how inspiring is that? Like that motivates me, that inspires me, that this younger generation is leading the older generation. So to recap, 100%, man, I've been angry, I've been sad, but also at the same time, Sree, really inspired and motivated by seeing what's taking place, by hearing so many prominent voices being heard, and also people realizing who may not be prominent, who may not have a blue check mark by their name, being willing to step up and say, this is not right. We demand change.
Thank you for sharing that. I know you don't always talk about these issues. Tell us how you came to understand that it is important that everybody, including someone like you and your background, especially trained as a journalist and being kind of down the middle, trying to be as objective as possible, and then becoming a thought leader, not something you called yourself, that people call you that, an educator, a speaker, a podcaster, all of that. How did you decide, and when did you know that you need to speak up?
It's a good question. It's been a challenge in many ways. And let me be clear, when I say the word challenge, people may say, come on, man, challenge. There are real challenges. But internally, there's been a challenge. You mentioned earlier, Sree, that, I come from a journalistic background. Though these days I spend most of my time on stages when I can travel all across the country and globe, delivering keynotes, doing consulting, facilitating workshops. At my core, Sree, I still consider myself a journalist. I still, in many ways, want to consider myself impartial. And the coaching work that I do one-on-one with executives and top leaders, though I do approach that as an executive coach, I also approach that as a journalist. And for me, my intent with conversations, my intent with audiences is really driven by questions. If anything, I'm a professional question asker. And I believe that by asking great questions, we can come up with great solutions and hear kind of what's not being said. If there's a gift that I have, it's asking great questions and being able to connect the dots that others don't see. And so I've been, I don't want to say quiet, because there are conversations going internally in my household, with my family, with my friends, in my community, organizations that I support. But being that journalist, sometimes it's a little bit more challenging to hit publish on some of those posts. But I think we reached that penultimate point where I think we can be impartial. We can be still come from a journalistic lens and still share and say what's not right. This isn't cool. And that's been the challenge for far too long. Far too many of us have allowed some travesties to take place. And then unfortunately, we get back to our day to day. We get back to the work. We get back to those Netflix shows. We get back to those other things. And I've reached a point where now, I do have a voice. A few people do listen. But it's not only my responsibility to share my voice, but what I'm trying to do as much as possible is also amplify those men and women who are sharing compelling information, resources that I'm learning from that I can share and beyond. To sum it up, it's been a journey from journalist to being willing to share more.
And you said that your gift is, your ability to talk to people. I think your gift is to take a great photo. Look at this website. So tell us about your digital profile and your digital presence and how you decide what you're doing. You have this great podcast called The Best Thing that we'll talk about. But I just love your website and why the importance of your digital footprint. It's not enough, as I always said, even back when we first met, to be great in real life. You have to have that digital presence. And that's why I'm doing that workshop, free workshop certification to up everybody's social media game. You've done that for so many people, but you're also taking care of your own social media and digital media too.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, first and foremost, can we just give a big round of applause for Photoshop? How great is Photoshop in this day and age? Because look at that photo right there and look at me right now. So I just want to just acknowledge Photoshop and give whoever created it a big high five. Having a digital footprint is so important. For years, we've always heard the mantra, Sree, of it's not who you know, it's who knows you. And I just want to add something on to that. It's not who you know, it's who knows what you want. We talk a lot about personal branding, and a few years back, I gave a Google talk. And what I said in that Google talk is your personal brand is what people say about you when you are not around. And 9 times out of 10, if somebody learns about you, Sree, through a friend, they see you on your Facebook page, someone forwards one of your Sunday notes, the first thing they're going to do is Google your name. And there's one thing that we have control over is our digital footprint. And in fact, I invite everyone right now. When is the last time you Googled your name? Go next when this ends, go to your favorite browser and Google your name and see what comes up. See what comes up and see if it represents what you want to be represented. Unfortunately, many times people Google their name and it's someone else. Other times they Google their name and it's a post or something that they're not too proud of. And other times they Google their name and nothing comes up, which I think is even worse than something coming up. So this is something that we can control. For a long time, I worked with personal branding, international personal branding platform about.me that helps freelancers tell that story. And there are so many free resources out there that you can use to shed light on who you are. And at the end of the day, for me, when people come to my website, I want them to know what I stand for. And I want them to know I stand for people being better and bolder. And that's what my mantra is all about, helping people reignite that boldness and that courage that they once had that is kind of withered and atrophy has set in. So that's what, for me, this is all about.
Thank you. Let's do one thing before we continue. I call it the global tour. We have people watching from all over the world. I want them to write in and say where they're watching from, how they're feeling about everything going on, and we'll introduce you to them. So let's start. And you'll tell us if you know any of these people, of course, but also if you know their cities, if you have a favorite meal you've eaten there or something you miss in those cities, if you've been, not been, all of that. So let's go to Anand's watching from India. Have you been?
Yeah, I've been to Bangalore for some talks and for some work over the years. And you said, do I miss any food? I miss absolutely everything from there. And I can't wait to get back to India in the near future.
That's awesome. So let's see who else is watching with us and who else is here. I know Jonathan Borstein watching from Union Square. You lived in New York. Tell me about New York.
Yeah, New York. I have that classic New York story. Moving there, I want to say in January 2000, Sree. I had left a good job after graduating from college in South Florida, whereas I was a sales representative for a major food company. But I had these aspirations and I had these goals of working in the television industry. And I can still remember arriving at LaGuardia, which was probably still as bad as it is today, way back in the year 2000, with $800 in my bank account. I knew one person, and that one person was kind enough to let me sleep on their floor for a variety of months while I figured things out. And I want to say 2.5 years after arriving in New York City, I did catch that break and found myself working for Nickelodeon and ended up co-hosting shows for them. And New York treated me so good. I started off in Astoria in Queens, found my way to Brooklyn, different parts there. Of course, Morningside Heights, where I got to know you, working for going to Columbia University, the Graduate School of Journalism. And I can still remember when you took all of us to go get a big piece of pizza at the place that no longer exists, unfortunately.
And so you've got all these great memories. I remind people that New York is a place that people come without a lot of resources. You know the story of President Obama, then a young man showing up at Columbia and knocking on the door of his roommate and nobody's there. So he spent his first night in New York, ready to go to Columbia, in a back alley on the Upper West Side, sleeping on top of his suitcase and not knowing where he's going to go and what's going to happen. And there he is, 27 years later, he's president of the United States. And that's just an example of what New York, not everybody, of course, can have the luck that you did and the luck that the president did, but many people do. And New York also is a painful place and how it treats some people. But let's see who else is watching. Let's see, Neil Parekh is watching from Springfield, Virginia. He is the executive producer of the New York Times Read Along. We had a fabulous conversation this morning where we were able to meet two amazing speakers. We had with us Anya Schifrin, who's a Columbia professor, and she was with us, and she was just amazing. And so was Dr. Holly Lofton, who is a professor a doctor at NYU Langone, and we talked today about so many of the issues happening in the world. Let's see who's also with us. We have so many comments coming in. Steve Taylor's watching from Philly. He's also one of our producers. Carla is watching. Okay, Philly, I want to give you a chance to Philly shout.
I've been fortunate many times over the years to spend a lot of time in Philly. My first time going to Philadelphia in undergrad at Western Michigan University, I was a track and field athlete. And I remember competing at the Penn Relays in Philadelphia. And I immediately knew that this was a city that was special. I mean, we saw the numbers of people obviously out in the streets recently, what was going on in Philadelphia. Over the years, I've had the opportunity to speak in Philly many times at places like Drexel University, at Temple University and beyond. Easy access from New York City for all those years that I lived there. Great place.
Mark Lee's with us. He's in the house from Durham, being positive. He was a guest on my show, teaching us how to be an ally, how do all of us who are not African-American, how to be allies with the African-American communities. I always say plural because there isn't one African-American community, right?
I think that's a really good point. And I guess I can speak personally on this. I mean, I'm a guy that I'm Black. I identify as a Black male. But it's funny because over the years, Sree, when people said, hey, what's your background? And I would say, I'm Black. And then there's always that, okay, but what else? And during that what else, people are like, okay, what else is in there? And I would let folks know, like, hey, my mother is mixed. She's Black and white. And my father is Cape Verdean. I mean, my grandparents came from the Cape Verde Islands to Massachusetts in the 1920s. And the Cape Verdean community is really fascinating because many Cape Verdeans identify with being Cape Verdean. Of course, similar to Brazil, some identify as being white, some identify as being Black. But when they came here to the United States, it was pretty interesting for them with so much was going on, of course, with race in the United States, and the people of darker complexions, immediately the people saw them as African Americans, as Black. And they were like, no, we're Cape Verdean. There's a lot of amazing literature about the Cape Verdean community, the great book called Between Race and Ethnicity. So yes, of course, we have West Indian communities. We have, we can go on and on and on about different communities that are Black that identify in many different ways. So I think it's pretty unique sometimes when, again, we always speak about something being from a monolithic community when there's so much diversity, so many different voices, so many different opinions as well.
I know not everybody knows enough about Cape Verde. People think it's near South America, but it's much closer to Africa, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, it's west of Senegal. So it's like an African population that, of course, Portuguese spend a lot of time there, the French, the Italians as well. And there are people of every complexion that you can speak of. Their native language is like a Creole, basically. I guess you can say it's a version of Portuguese, but it's a Creole, an amazing seafaring community. My grandfather was a whaler. A lot of people go there for vacation over there in Europe, and it's just an amazing, loving community. I have a lot of family in New Bedford, Massachusetts, where a lot of Cape Verdeans settled, and also places like Boston and Providence and beyond. Just a fascinating, loving community.
And do you think that's that connection, the seafaring community, because of that connection, the whalers from New England? Do you think that's what the history is?
Absolutely. I think that's where a lot of people, that's where there was their first access, and they ended up staying there. And then again, a lot of these folks came with seafaring skills coming from the islands, like my grandfather, and they ended up staying there in the Northeast. Though there are big Cape Verdean communities, big maybe is the wrong word, but if you look at places like Sacramento and beyond, and when you see a fellow Cape Verdean or you find out someone's Cape Verdean, it's like, it's just love. It's personal. So yeah, those are my people, and I love them.
And I'm sorry, I myself don't know enough about the place. What is the language that's spoken? And you said tourists go there, but do Americans go? And how do they go? What's the flight? When flight is possible?
Yeah, to be clear, unfortunately, this is an embarrassment to me, Sree. I've yet to visit the Cape Verde Islands. It is a dream. It is a mission of mine. And it's funny, during this pandemic, I've had the opportunity to get a little bit insightful about all the places I could have went that I have not gone. So that's going to be first on the list to take myself and my family. The language I speak is basically a Creole version of Portuguese. Some people will say it's not Portuguese, but a lot of people say the closest thing it is to is Portuguese. A lot of people will fly into Senegal to get there, to Dakar to get there. Of course, there are other routes to get there from, southern Western Europe and beyond. So it's a destination that I have to get to sooner rather than later.
Well, so I know you'll be rolling cameras when you go out there so that people can share your story and take a look. So this shows you where it is on this map, and you can see how close it is, in fact, to Africa. And so I'm sure you'll get there, and we'll all be traveling with you, or maybe some of us will want to come with you on that journey. Molly Roberts in Washington, give you a chance to talk about DC.
Yeah, DC is a place that I spent a lot of time over the years. I did the commute, Sree, from New York to DC for quite a few years. I worked with PBS and McNeil Lehrer Productions as a producer, as a correspondent on one of their shows. So I got to know the Isella train very well and spent a lot of time in the DC area, one of my favorite places, an amazing community. Of course, a lot's going on there right now with discussions, of course, what's going on with Trump and beyond. And again, a rich community, amazing history.
And we'll talk about your career, but you also, in addition to working for PBS, you also worked for BET, and that must have been special.
Working for BET was great. It was interesting. When I finished grad school for journalism at Columbia University, I struggled for a while to get hired, Sree. I assumed that once I got this degree, I'd immediately get hired. And maybe I kind of limited myself because I knew that I wanted to stay in New York City and I didn't want to go do local news in different parts of the country. So I was a bit limited. And I was really fortunate that BET News, the news division, gave me my first break after getting that journalism degree. And I had the opportunity to work with a dear friend of mine, also a mentor, a gentleman by the name of Keith Brown, amazingly talented individual who also is a graduate of the journalism school at Columbia University. And I had the opportunity, Sree, for those 2-3 years that I worked for BET News, frankly, to tell stories that I think otherwise wouldn't have been told at other networks. I was able to dive in and make things happen and get curious on things that may have been maybe a 2-minute, 30-second story at some places that I got to do full-on documentaries. And it was fascinating, frankly. I've been in a lot of newsrooms in my life, the same way, Sree, you've been in a lot of newsrooms. There's something really fascinating about walking into a newsroom and all you see are brown faces, people that look like you, because for the most of my life in my professional career, whether it's working for the NBCs of the world, the PBSs of the world, the Nickelodeons of the world, startups beyond, typically I've been like the one person of color. I can think about my experience at Columbia, where there wasn't a lot of people walking those sidewalks that looked like me, even undergrad. So it's what a powerful moment to walk into a newsroom when people look like you. And what I don't think people know a lot about, and sorry to digress on this, but I think it's important. What I don't think people know a lot about, and I think is important to talk about right now, Sree, is what it's like to be the only one. And if you want to grow, you want to evolve your experience as a human, know what it's like to be the only one of your ethnicity. Find out what it's like to be the only one of your gender. Find out what it's like to be the only one of your religion. Find out what it's like to be the only one of your political party around others. And that brings about understanding. That brings about empathy. That brings about compassion. And I think it's just so rare that people know what it's like to be the only one.
And you've certainly had to deal with that. I've had my share of being the only one, and it teaches you a lot about yourself as you go through life, as you do that. But there's so many comments coming in. We need to give you a chance to hear. So many people want to say hello. Linda's watching from Long Island, desperately needs some positivity, she says. Paula Kiger watching from Tallahassee, Florida. And Jacqueline says, we'll definitely spread the word. Thanks, Sree, says Jacqueline. And Carla says, hope your weather is okay, Paula. She's talking in Florida. They're both out in Florida, so they're talking. Rick says, bravo. And Paula says that it was pretty gray and rainy all morning. And this is something that, in the middle of everything that's going on, there are tornadoes, there are thunderstorms, there are in India right now, in Mumbai, there were big cyclones coming through. And it's hard to try to focus on things because life goes on, even as we are focused on particular things that are happening. Here's another New Yorker. And Daryl's watching from Richmond Hill in Queens, New York. He's even given the zip code and the Indo-Caribbean community there. He said he had doubles for breakfast. Doubles, as you may know, is a very popular Caribbean dish, Indo-Caribbean dish. It's made of curried chickpeas and 2 soft, fluffy flatbreads. And so he's inviting everybody to go out and have doubles with him in Richmond Hill. And Stefan, who's part of our team, says Positively Sunday. We need this every week. And so many people are here. Rick says 50% of people over 65 have 2 or more chronic diseases. Do due to unhealthy lifestyles. Well, perhaps not everybody, some of it is genetics. And of course, African Americans, as we know, have been extra hurt by the pandemic already, affected in so many ways, but a disproportionate number are being affected, being killed by the pandemic. And you've certainly looked at that as you're going through. Ellen says, hello from New York City. Mark says, we had two 13-year-old folks who led one of the protests here in Durham. They organized it and put it together. So I have great hope in the energy of young people today. It's been amazing. Have you ever been to Westchester County? Lori is there.
Oh yeah, I spent a lot of time in Westchester County over the year, Metro North. That's a popular place. Yeah.
Okay, Courtney's a former New Yorker, now in Tucson, Arizona.
Found my way to Arizona quite a bit. It's funny. I want to say I've been to 48 states now, doing the speaking thing where I can speak anywhere between 30 to 40 times a year. I've been fortunate to hit almost every state. In the last two states that I haven't been to are North Dakota and Alabama. So I need to make that happen this year.
Well, Alabama is a big college town, big college state, and you're a big hit on the college circuit. So I'm surprised that you haven't hit the big college towns there. And you've been to South Dakota. So now you've got to get to North Dakota, as you said. Pradnya is watching from Silver Spring, Maryland, a good friend of the show. She's spoken multiple times. Here, as Nishan says, what I've learned and observed at home in lockdown is that kids, old age parents, and plants need extra attention and care and shared moments of togetherness. Nishan, thank you. That's a beautiful thing she said. I don't know if you saw Shonda Rhimes, the great Shonda Rhimes had a tweet, which I think will be one of those tweets of the pandemic. She said, I've been homeschooling for 1 hour so far, right at the beginning, and teachers deserve $1 billion a year, or even an hour or a week, she said, maybe. How do you feel about that?
I agree. I think, unfortunately, teachers they don't get as much respect as they should. My wife and I, again, we have 4-year-old twins, and she's done an amazing job while I'm kind of working at home. Teachers are greatly overlooked in society. I don't think they get the respect they deserve. We know that so many teachers have to spend their own money on resources and things to make sure that their kids can learn. What's been fascinating about this time, Sree, as you know, is that you look at these kids and how many of these schools, obviously, not many people, even universities, were prepared for what's happening. And you mentioned this in your Sunday note, Sree, but what's breaking my heart right now, and I don't think we're going to truly know the results of this, is what's happening to these communities right now that aren't being served by education. As you know, a lot of folks that aren't being served right now are Black and brown communities, and many in Los Angeles, particularly, a lot of folks in school got out with the pandemic. A lot of students can't be accounted for. A lot of people don't have access to technology like computers. Not every household has access to internet. We talk a lot about essential workers, but not every household has access to a mom or dad that can actually be home with their child to help them with their homework, because they are essential. They have to be out. So my heart really breaks for many of these kids, that my hope is that they aren't going to be left behind during this time.
Thank you. Folks, you're watching a fabulous conversation with Antonio Neves. He's at The Real Antonio Neves. Please follow him on Twitter and check out his website, The Antonio Neves. And we want to make sure that there's someone in your life who'd benefit from this conversation. Please tag them. Please retweet on Twitter. We're on LinkedIn as well. And Antonio, I don't know if you had a chance to do all the resharing and retweeting.
I did.
Okay, we appreciate that. One of the things I learned is that it's not my audience, it's bringing your audience to this. And for those who are watching, I do the show every day, mostly at 9 p.m. Eastern. And if you've not yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do. We're about to cross a whopping 1,000 people. I have channels with 10, 20, 30 times that number of followers, but I love trying to build YouTube. What I've learned, Antonio, is that unlike on Twitter and Facebook, where you have thousands of people follow you quite easily or relatively easily, on YouTube, you have to earn every subscriber. I started with about, I wasn't taking YouTube seriously, and I said, this pandemic, I'm going to take it seriously. So I've reached like 995, which, and any other platform, I'd be like, my God, I've got a long way to go. But here, I feel like I've earned every single person who subscribed to me.
Yeah, YouTube is one of those ones I think a lot of people have taken for granted. They haven't put their energy into. I'm like you. The lowest numbers I have are on YouTube, and I think it's because I haven't dedicated that time. But also, I think what's unique, and we talked about branding a little bit earlier, is that we have to remember how unique, different content needs to be for each platform. What you share on Pinterest needs to be different than what you share on Instagram. What you share on Instagram needs to be a little bit different than what you share on LinkedIn, Twitter, etc. With all these great social media tools, a lot of times we just share and publish everything, the same content, to all the different platforms. But as you just described, people on YouTube want something a little bit different, and to get them to lean in, to get them to hit subscribe, is a little bit different than getting someone to do that on Facebook or Instagram. It's a more of a commitment if I'm going to commit to subscribe to you. So I'm glad that you're getting close to that 1,000 number.
Yeah, I just wanted to show you on a kind of more serious note. We're looking at the New York Times. We do the New York Times read along 8:30 a.m. every Sunday, and look at this cover of the business section. Corporate America has failed Black America, and you do a lot of work with corporations. We saw on your website all these companies you work with, and they've been now giving lots of lip service. They're tweeting and Instagramming and everything. This is one very serious headline. The other Sunday Review cover: why don't the police act as if they're accountable to Black Americans? And I just wanted your kind of sense as you see those two actually similar stories, but in two different parts of the paper. And you may have also seen kind of the breaking news that the New York Times has the editor of the opinion section, James Bennett, whose team put together that Senator Tom Cotton op-ed that was widely criticized by Black reporters at the paper, who said this puts my life in danger, and others, has now resigned just in the last couple of hours. So your thoughts on all of that? I know it's a lot to throw at you, but I know you can handle it.
No, I appreciate it. What I'm seeing right now, I talk a lot about being bold and courageous. And what I'm seeing are a lot of people being bolder and more courageous than they've ever been before. And for many years, as we saw in organizations, there has been a lot of lip service. They've said this, they've started this committee, they've started this initiative, but there have been no real tangible results. And now I think it's obvious that the big ones, I don't care if we're talking about Nike, Google, and beyond, that they know it just can't be lip service. There has to be tangible action that's taking place. When I've seen these organizations speak out, Sree, it made me think about over the years. I've been speaking on stages now for almost 10 years, and I can speak to a crowd as large as 5,000 and sometimes a crowd the size of 100 people. And it just hit me during this break, as these companies are spreading these words in support of the African-American community, how when I go there, sometimes I'm one of the few people of color in that room. And I'm the guy that's speaking on the stage. So they say they have certain values. They say they have certain things that are important, but it's not reflected in their hiring practices. And that's what's really important we have to look at. We have to look at the hiring practice and who these folks are bringing in, how they're being evaluated, what different pools are they looking at in terms of finding these young, talented men and women from all different backgrounds, because it's just not happening. And now I'm like, wow, I was their diversity for the day, being a little bit naive to that before. I serve on the board of an amazing organization called the Marcus Graham Project. It's based out of Dallas, but it works nationwide with top organizations like Google, Apple, and beyond. And they're dedicated to developing the next level of leadership in the media, advertising, entertainment industry, and beyond. And every year they do a boot camp and they bring in amazingly talented individuals that end up landing jobs at top places like, top advertising agencies, top tech firms, top entertainment outlets, and beyond. And I think it's organizations like that that are making a real difference. So of course, there are things that have to happen systematically, and with the systematic financial structures, with the educational structures, with the healthcare structures, of course, with police and beyond. Those things are critical and have to happen, right? These things are just baked into what's happened in our society. And on the flip side, when it comes to business, there are a lot of organizations that are working to shape and transform things. So when you see these organizations say stupid things, make big mistakes, and you're like, why don't they have some diversity in that room so they don't make these types of mistakes? Not even just diversity, just I'm even tired of the word diversity, because it's just, this is how it's supposed to be. Have a variety of people in this room. So I'm optimistic that we're going to start seeing a lot of different talent being brought into rooms that previously wasn't there, and that may make some people uncomfortable. And that's good, because I think the challenge is, we talk about personal growth. A lot of times we think personal growth is easy. We think organizational growth is easy, but for positive things to happen, You have to be willing to get uncomfortable. That's where the growth comes from. I'm going to get corny motivational speaker on you, but I like to think sometimes about how we build muscle. You build muscle by lifting heavy weights, and that actually tears your muscle fibers. And then what that does is it grows back stronger and it grows back bigger. And what we have to do right now, even if it's uncomfortable, is lift some heavy weights in all of our institutions, systems, corporate America, and beyond. And we have to remind people this isn't just during the pandemic, during these atrocities and lynchings that are happening, but these has to happen all the time after this.
And now I want to thank you for sharing that. I want to show everyone your podcast because that's one of the ways you have reached the world and you've done so much with that. So let's pull up your podcast. You want to tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so this is what's fascinating, especially in times like these, during pandemics, during all these horrible atrocities that are taking place. It's called The Best Thing, Sree, and I can't wait to have you as a guest on this podcast. And what I talk to people about is the best thing to ever happen to them that would rarely show up on a resume, come up on a bio, or come up in conversation. And as you probably know, sometimes the best thing to happen to people, Sree, isn't always the most positive. It's not always the best thing. So when you eradicate the traditional things, you can't say getting married, you can't say having kids, you can't say graduating from college. Again, those things that would never show up on a resume, bio, or come up in conversation that have impacted your life, powerful things come up. And I'll give you some examples. One person shared that when she was in high school, her family lost everything to the Madoff Ponzi scheme, and how that transformed her life as a high school student to go to college to become an entrepreneur, because she had to figure out things fast financially because her family lost everything. Another woman talked about how she found her way to entrepreneurship after she got laid off from 3 straight jobs. Another individual, Damon West, who was once sentenced to 65 years in a Texas prison, who eventually got paroled after X amount of years, how that has transformed his life to living a life of recovery and service to others. Again, these are the best things. Former Congressman Jim Nussle from Iowa now serves as the president and CEO of the Credit Union National Association, talked about having a daughter with Down syndrome, how that was one of the best things ever happened to him because it reframed his life and how to look at things. So all those folks who are listening right now, even though this has been a traumatizing and a traumatic period, being home with this pandemic, potentially people losing their jobs and losing income. I know about that firsthand. I'm a man who gets on a plane almost every single week to go give talks that all got wiped out, that went away. For those people that are experiencing some tough things in their community, the reframe that we always can ask ourselves coming to positivity is, how can we ensure this is one of the best things that happened to us, right? To ensure that it's not the best thing isn't behind us, but it is in front of us. And I think it's all, reframing and the work that we're going to do moving forward. And I can't wait to have you on as a guest, Sree, because I'm really curious about what's one of those best things that you would share that wouldn't show up on a resume, bio, or isn't a traditional marker of success.
Thank you. I will have to work on that, and I'd be honored to be there. And by the way, we saw the ratings. You got 4.9 on these podcasts, which are excellent. And so everyone, please subscribe. The best thing, wherever you get your podcast, you're looking here at the Apple Podcast, but obviously any podcast platform that you like, please do go in and check that out.
Sorry to interrupt. And what's wild about technology and podcast, and you know this, for some reason, this podcast, you're going to laugh, Sree, where this podcast is very popular. It's very popular in Iceland. It's very popular in Belgium. And it's very popular in Singapore for some reason. And I know it's going to eventually get a real big following here in the States as well. But one thing I love about our message is that sometimes we think our message is going to catch on with our neighbors. We think it's going to catch on with our local communities, but sometimes it's other folks that really latch on to what we're doing. And so I invite you to hit publish and create if you're thinking about doing something and not waiting. I think one thing a lot of people have done during this time as well is they've been willing to finish something. A lot of people have a lot of open apps going on in their life, a lot of projects that are 20% done, 40% done, 70% done, but nothing's getting done. And I've heard so many amazing stories of men and women who are using this time to finish something, right? We have so many projects that mean something to us that we never finish. And a lot of folks are finishing things. So I think that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, there really is. And I think you'll inspire some people tonight. So everyone, please check out The Best Thing, as he was saying. By the way, Courtney likes your website, says that is a great website. My digital footprint is old. She says she was a guest on our positivity night a few years ago. It feels like years ago. Obviously, it was a few weeks ago.
Hey, thank you very much, Courtney. It's gonna actually a new site's going up really, really soon as I gear up for the release of my book in January. But it's funny how you said it was a few years ago, even though it was a few weeks ago.
Stefan says that's a slamming portrait on Antonio's website. Why do you need a new website? Your website looks pretty cool. We're all just praising it, and you're going to go tear it down?
It's time for a refresh. I think sometimes it's just time for a refresh. And that's one thing I've wanted to do for a long time, and this pandemic has given me the opportunity to do that. Thank you for the reference to the slamming portrait. As I mentioned at the top of this, a big high five is due to Photoshop. So I have an updated photo going on there as well. I think that photo was taken of me a couple of years ago, and I just wanted to refresh. I got some gray hairs now that I've earned that are going to go on there.
Well, you have certainly earned those gray hairs. If you have them, you earned them. I want to make sure that we continue our global tour because so many people have commented. Courtney says, "Love that your personal brand is what people say about you when you're not around." And Mark said, "I just Googled my name. Most of it was me, but there was another Mark Lee there as well." And Mark Lee is a pretty, you can think of two common names kind of put together there. And Jacqueline says hello from LinkedIn. By way of Birmingham, UK. Hilda says is watching from Fort Lauderdale. You've been to the Miami area, obviously. Maybe some of the things can't be shared publicly, what you've done in Miami, but maybe some things you can.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in Miami. Actually, Sree, my very first job out of college was not far from Fort Lauderdale in a town called Hollywood, Florida. And I spent a year there being responsible for 25 Winn-Dixie grocery stores as a sales representative before I moved to New York City with $800. And always have loved South Florida. I love the community. And I get down there pretty often for speaking engagements as well.
And here's somebody, Quinn is watching from Chicago by the lake.
Yeah, Chicago's a place. Listen, I grew up in a small town in Michigan called Jackson. I went to undergrad at Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo, Michigan, just a couple of hours away from Chicago. So Chicago was part of my youth growing up. We never were able to get on airplanes when I was a kid to go on vacation, but we were able to get in the car and drive to Chicago and see family there. One of my favorite cities. And I just love the energy that's coming out of Chicago right now.
I took my kids on the college tour back when you could do that. They're 17 now. And I think they really wanted to do a food tour of Chicago because we ate all the classics. And Chicago is a great city and great people there too. And what do they call it? City of broad shoulders. And that's something that's always struck with me. Now, you mentioned Photoshop. So I'm going to actually show you something that I had the privilege of experiencing. That's the man who invented Photoshop, Thomas Knoll, creator of Photoshop. And that's a photograph at the Met where I did a talk and I got to meet Thomas Knoll and with Lindsay Adario, who's an amazing photographer, and Jeff Rosenheim, who runs the Met photo collection. Can you imagine that job that he has? And there you go. And you should get him on your podcast, Mr. Knoll, because obviously you want to say thank you to him.
That's amazing. I love that you were able to pull that photo up and you have that documented. One thing I can say about you, Sree, that I've always loved, a good friend of mine told me something his grandfather once told him. His grandfather told him to live an interesting life because no one wants to talk to an old person who doesn't have interesting stories to tell. And you're a very young man, but you've lived and are living an interesting life. And I love that it's all documented.
Yeah, thank you. I'm accused of too much documentation, but I tell people you must document because your grandkids and others will want to see it. Here's Shonali watching from LA saying hello. And Neeraj says, good morning from Bihar in India. And so many people, Sonali says she came to New York without knowing anyone, and that must have been hard for her. What is your secret, Rick asks. Great positivity and energy. So I'll ask you, what do you eat? Are you over caffeinated at the moment? What's going on here?
Definitely a coffee guy. But I think if there's a quote unquote secret, it is making a choice every single day. We talk a lot about committing, right? You have to commit. But I think what people forget is that every single day that we wake up, we have to recommit as well. We have to recommit to what's most important. And then having that North Star, just knowing what you're heading towards, I think is extremely important. One of the questions I like to ask people I'm working with at organizations or one-on-one is, what do you want? A very straightforward question of what do you want? And most people don't know what they want. And so they end up getting a variety of things that they really don't want because they're not clear of what they want. And I just find that when we have that North Star that's guiding us, it can lead us in the right direction, even if it's big picture. But also, Sree, for me, it's important for me to believe that the best is ahead. And I truly do believe that. And every single day that I'm blessed to wake up, especially during a pandemic like this, it means that I have a say in this. And I think what people are realizing right now during this pandemic is that in many ways they've been living on autopilot. They have been going through the motions. They've been living, quote unquote, good lives, things that on paper, everything looks good, but internally something has been off for quite some time. And this pandemic has shed a light on some things that they want to change, some things that they want to tweak moving forward. And they do want to be bold and they do want to be courageous once again. I'll just tell a quick story. There's a story in the New York Times a few years back about two fashion designers. And one of them was talking about what it was like in New York City in the 1990s. And he was really just reminiscing of what it was like and how much has changed. And he, at some point during the interview, he said, "Oh man, I really miss the old New York." And what he was talking about was what it was like in the 1990s. But then his business partner corrected him and said, "You don't miss the old New York. You miss the old you. Who you were during that time, how adventurous you were, how confident you were, how optimistic you were, how bold you were, how courageous you were." And many of us, what we truly miss when we talk about the best days, we miss who we were back then. And those are things I truly believe that we can reignite, we can rediscover, and that we can bring to our today. And I think the choice we have to make is, are we going to choose to look through the rear view mirror of life or to look through the front windshield? I mean, there's a reason why the rear view mirror is so small and that front windshield is so big. So I just ask people who are watching right now, which one are you looking through? Doesn't mean things are going to be easy, right? But you have a choice of which you look through the front windshield or the rear view mirror. And I'm a front windshield kind of guy.
Oh, I love that. Oh my God. That is, I've never, I've heard lots of motivational speakers and everything, but I've never heard that. Thank you for sharing that. And look, my dad's watching from Kerala in India, and he said positivity is important when positive is negative in this topsy-turvy world. I love you, Acha. Thank you for supporting everything I've done. And my mom's also watching from Kerala. And Antonio, when you go next to India, you got to go all the way south, real south. I know you went to Bangalore, but all the way south to Kerala. And it's really a beautiful place, and I know you would love it. And I know I'm thinking of your dad, as you said, he is in a nursing home right now in Kentucky, and you shared with us that he has dementia. And we think of everybody whose families are torn apart at this moment with everything that's going on, and we're really thinking and praying for your father at this moment. We have Jacqueline saying boldness and courage, amen. She says, and so many people commenting. We can't get to everything. Terry says she wants to be my 1,000th YouTube subscriber.
Yeah.
I think one of you might just be if you join tonight. And Jacqueline says, I love the best thing theme. These defining moments are what empower us and change us for the better. And Terry said the same thing. Anand is quoting you. If you want to build big muscles, you need to lift heavy weights, by Antonio Neves. There you go. And Jacqueline says, haha, this is awesome to be popular in Iceland. A prophet is never appreciated in his own community. But we're gonna change that. And there's Terry talking about the importance of bouncing back and resilience. And Vandana, who's our producer, along with Rose Horowitz, says, it feels like years ago, 88 shows in a row. Is it not easy? Jonathan has a COVID project list to tackle the list of things he's done. He's about halfway through, he says. And Jacqueline loves that you have traveled so much in the country, and she's inspired. Lori says, thoroughly enjoying the show. Mark says, sometimes we've not documented enough. Okay, here's a chance for you to talk about Seattle.
Oh, I love Seattle. Seattle's a place where I used to get to on a regular basis as well. When I was based, I live in Southern California, but for a while I regularly worked with this online education platform called Creative Live. I happen to know the CEO and founder, Chase Jarvis, well. and I've hosted a variety of classes for them. So I would go to Seattle on a regular basis. Another one of those dynamic communities. Absolutely love the Pacific Northwest. I spent a lot of time in Seattle, a lot of time in Portland as well. And Seattle just feels different. It's such a unique community compared to the rest of the country. I really hope that one day they get a basketball team back there, even though they obviously have a lot of success with their football team. And again, just a beautiful community.
Look at this. Nishant says, thank you both for making my day full of positivity. Shashwati says, every day I watch this show, really enjoy. Shashwati, thank you so much. Ashok is also watching from Kerala, India. Jacqueline says, we reinvent, reset who we are multiple times in life. COVID is just another opportunity to do this. And folks, I'm just so touched by everybody participating, talking to you. We only have a few minutes left with Antonio Neves. Please follow him, everyone. We're going to show some of your other work that you've done, but I do want to ask you, because people might be wondering, how is it possible for an African-American man who is raising a family and is facing the world and looking at what's happening? How do you get through the day? How do you agree to come on a show like this and share and think about the pain that's in the world as you go through everything you're going through with your own parents who are both, have health issues, and just, how do you not curl up and give up? How? I want to know, Anton.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I want people to know it is okay to feel that emotion. I think a lot of us right now, Sree, have a backlog of emotion. There are people, men and women right now, that have some tears that are deep inside of them that need to come out. And if that's the case for you, I invite you to find a safe space to allow those tears to come out. There's some of us that have a lot of anger and anguish inside of us that needs to come out. And if there are some woods you can go out and yell, or a punching bag that you can punch, I think you should go do that. There's a lot of us that have some joy and some laughter we've been repressing because so much is going on. We feel a little bit guilty about having some joy and some laughter in our life. And I want you to be willing to have that joy and have that laughter. Again, we have a backlog of emotions in front of us, right? In many ways, it can feel like a can of soda is being shaken nonstop and never open. And unfortunately, when that happens, we tend to explode at the wrong moment, and we explode on the wrong people. So first and foremost, I want to invite everyone, whatever those emotions you have that are repressed, let them out. If your outlet is writing and journaling, do it. If it's through working with the coach, do it. If it's therapy, do it. Family, friends, have those conversations. Second, Sree, I'm a firm believer that no one who has accomplished anything of significance did it alone. And I think this is an easy time for people to isolate. This is an easy time to retreat. And I get it. Things are heavy. And it would have been easy for me to say no to doing a show like this today. But I truly believe that we are better together. Even if no one was watching this right now, frankly, Sree, just seeing your face right now lifts my spirits. Connecting with you brings joy to my life. You're someone that I remember from, Columbia's journalism school that never said no. You always welcomed people to your space. For a guy that was nonstop busy, who didn't have time, I never saw you say no or later to one student. And that's just right now, just a good reminder to me when I get those emails, those messages to come in, to lean in and truly to support someone. And I have to remind ourselves that people are willing to help you. But there's a big caveat. And that caveat is, and you must be willing to ask for that help. People are willing to help you, but you must be willing to ask for that help. And I'm so fortunate, Sree, to have an amazing community. I haven't done this alone. First and foremost, I have a supportive wife, and I'm fortunate enough to have a healthy family. But I also have a supportive community of allies. I know someone you mentioned earlier mentioned allies. I have some men and women in my life that I pick up the phone and I call, or we'll get on FaceTime, and we'll engage, or we'll leave voice notes for each other. It's not always an hour conversation or a 30-minute conversation. Sometimes it can be as quick as 5 minutes, but that feeds my energy. It's like if your battery is almost on E, you got to plug it back in. You have to refuel. I'm inviting you right now not to go about this alone when it's so easy to go about it alone. As you know, isolation, loneliness is also an epidemic that is facing people right now and is hurting us. So I invite you to lean on your community and to ask for help. And that's what's gotten me through this time. I belong to a men's group that meets every week. That used to meet every Thursday in person, Sree, at 7 a.m. Now we really can't do that. We've been meeting virtually. I have 5 things on my to-do list that I have to do every single day that are non-negotiable. And one of those 5 that I have to check off on my list is it just says connect. And connect for me means I have to connect with a human being with the phone call in real time, not text, not email, but I have to connect. And I know that when I connect with someone, and we can look at positive psychology as an example to verify this, it makes a positive difference in my life. So how do I get through these challenging times? How do I get up each morning optimistic about the future? It's by having that amazing community that reminds me that I'm not in this alone, and there are people I can still laugh with. There are people I can cry with. There are people that I can share some really tough truths with as well. So maybe a little bit more than you expected, but that's the answer.
I love it. Here's Vandana saying, absolutely, learning how to ask for help is hard, but so important. Jacqueline says, preach, Antonio. And Jaswati says, today's show is meaningful to me as my life has gone through severe struggles, but I still believe in living life. That is so important. And we're all learning together here tonight. My dad says isolation is a big epidemic at this time. That is a great observation. And Daryl says he's allergic to isolation is what he has learned. Jacqueline says, this is so awesome and it has lifted my spirits. Jacqueline, you have to message me because we want you on the show to share your insights with the world. We only have a few minutes left with you. I promised you 45 minutes, but we're already gone over. But I can't let you leave without showing you a couple of things or showing our audience a couple of things, including this video that they may not be ready for at this moment. But here we go. We're going to play this, and you know where this is going. So let's play this video right now.
Oh, wow.
Hey, what's up? This is Strickland, the improv comedy show where everything is made up on the spot. We have 2 teams of performers ready to tear it up just for you guys tonight. You pick live. We're still here in the middle of Times Square where Garbaggio is wrestling items that you pick. This time, you pick boxer shorts. Garbaggio, take it away. And right in the exact seat you're seeing right here, this is where all the celebrities are going to take a seat and chill out. Oh, man. Dude, I can already picture the scene. All the big celebrities out, people.
What happened to your hair?
Oh, wow. Well, the funniest, I had dreadlocks for about 5 years. I wanted them when I was in high school, when I was a kid. The first time I ever saw Busta Rhymes in a video, but my mom wouldn't let me get dreadlocks until I turned 18. And I finally had them for 5 years in New York City. And it was just a fun journey. When I left New York for the first time to come to LA, I decided to cut them off. And, looking at that, Sree, I did Nickelodeon from about 2001 to 2004 or so. For me, it's just amazing, the reminders that there are chapters in our life, chapters that we move on from, chapters we move forward with, but they make us who we are. I don't reference Nickelodeon too much these days, but I'm so glad you showed that. And so long ago, but we've all lived some amazing chapters. And my hope is to continue to make some new ones moving forward. Maybe if my hairline comes back, I'll get some dreadlocks again.
Well, I thought I was worried when I said, what happened to your hair? You were going to say, what happened to mine? So I'm glad you didn't. And Ellen says she loves the hair, and Jacqueline says that's when you were a baby. And Stefan says, man, I needed this tonight from you tonight. So that's beautiful. And we have just a couple of minutes left. If I can go on the serious side for a minute, one of the things that I'm trying to do in this series is to learn myself, to get an education. And I said, as the student teaching the professor, but also to teach my community, the Asian American community, the South Asian community. I don't think we understand enough of the African American experience. Your family's been here since the 20s, at least on one side. Other side might have been even longer. What are things that you want everyone to understand of what it's like to be an African American, no matter how successful you are, no matter how famous you are? What are some things that you face that I don't necessarily face? That why this is a moment where things have to change? Why this is a moment where someone like General Colin Powell, who has achieved the highest success in the world, Secretary of State, head of the U.S. military, why today he announced that he will not be doing anything to support this president, will be voting for Joe Biden. What is that Black experience that the rest of us don't know?
Wow. I mean, I could go on and on about this, but I think a few things. I mean, I know what it's like to be racially profiled when driving. And some of the consistent themes I can think about when I got pulled over, when I had cornrows in my hair. And times when I had a regular crisp haircut like this, if you want to call it crisp, the times I got pulled over for doing nothing wrong were times that I fit a profile of having cornrows. Here we are in 2020, Sree, and there's still times that I walk into major speaking events and I speak at major corporations that sometimes people make assumptions about who I am and why I'm there. It's never the assumption that I'm the speaker, the person that's there to deliver the keynote, but can I help you? Or I'm questioned like a little bit more than I think I should be questioned. I don't know what know what it's like to walk into a space where you're the only one, and throughout your whole life, you've had to find a way to make it easier for others as opposed to them making it easy for you. I don't know if you know what it's like to see someone that looks like you get killed regularly on television, on cameras, or people that look like your family as well, and to see nothing done about it and hear just lip service going on and on and on in elections. It breaks my heart, man, when people say there's nothing wrong. When people say that we've reached equality, what are you complaining about? And that reminds me of the power of story. I take responsibility for telling a story and making sure people can hear it. And that means that I have to sometimes adjust my story. And I have to remember that storytelling is a unique skill. And I have to ask myself sometimes, what is the best way when I share something that's going to get this person to hear me? Right? Sometimes you have to lead with data. Sometimes you have to lead with emotions. Sometimes you have to lead with story. Sometimes you have to lead with a little bit more aggression, if you will. But I think we have to ask ourselves, how can we get people to better listen and know two people are the same? But I can tell you one thing, man, it's tiring sometimes. It's tiring. I found myself, I was talking to my wife, and I live in a neighborhood where, frankly, I'm one of the few brown faces in my neighborhood in an area of West LA. And came home from a run one morning prior to the pandemic, and I was jogging, and it was still dark out before 6 a.m. And I saw a white woman coming towards me on the same side of the street. And you know what my immediate instinct was, Sree? Let me jog and cross the street to the far side so she's not worried about me. Like, that was my instinct that has been ingrained in me. And I can't tell you how many times in my life there's been something similar to that when I shrunk. I had to shrink into spaces to not make someone else uncomfortable, right? Based on my past experiences. That's me making that move to run across the street. I don't know that woman, but it's based on the data that I've collected in my life that, Antonio, the best thing you can do right now is just cross the street, right? Or so those things are exhausting and they're tiring, and I feel it hurts me that my body is still programmed in many ways to do that. But again, I'm also optimistic. So for folks right now who are in spaces, I just want you to be willing to say something. A lot of times comments are said, people say things, people tweet things, and we just kind of nod our heads and uncomfortably. But I'm going to invite you next time someone says something to say something. And maybe you can say it in a way that they can hear why something is wrong. I'm going to invite you to acknowledge it, to acknowledge it, right? To acknowledge that there are systematic things that are wrong in our education system, that are wrong in our finance system. I mean, we can look at mortgages, right? That are wrong in our healthcare system, that are wrong in the language that we use. I mean, I heard someone say the other day, like Dr. King said many moons ago, that when African Americans receive some type of aid, it's called welfare. When white people receive it, it's called a subsidy. Think about just that difference in language right there, right? These things, I want you to acknowledge it and know that it does exist and not make me feel like I'm crazy for saying this is broken, this is wrong. And I think the last thing we have to do is acknowledge that it's not one conversation. That one conversation that you have with someone to educate them on maybe what's wrong about how they're doing something. That one conversation you have with a colleague at the office, why that comment they made was not cool. Or that suggestion you make, you can't just do it once. I heard a quote when I was in high school that I'll never forget, when I was in college that I'll never forget. And that is, repetition is the key to all learning. I can't promise you that everyone is going to hear you, but someone is going to hear you. So the opportunity you have is not to be silent. We're tired. You know, and I've been super blessed in my life. Don't get me wrong. I've been fortunate to experience some amazing things, but some things don't go away. Whether I'm at the airport, whether I'm in the gas station, driving around town, some things I'll never forget. So that's what I would say, Sree.
Thank you. Mark says, forget, you don't even have to be profiled in a car. You can be profiled in an elevator when people decide who you are, and no matter how you're dressed or anything, people decide who you are.
And one last thing, it's funny. In my book, I have a chapter about talking about wearing a uniform. And for the longest time, when I was a kid, Sree, I thought that the picture of success was the white men I saw growing up. I have blue collar parents. My father worked in factories his whole life. My mother was a secretary at an organization. And I thought that successful people wore khakis, a white button down, a blue blazer, and some loafers with tassels on them. And I can still remember, Sree, the first time I got an internship in college and I put that on. I'm like, oh, I'm finally successful. And I looked at myself in the mirror and I said, something doesn't feel right. This isn't me. And I want to say you actually inspired me, Sree, a few years back. I'm not sure when it happened, but I felt like I saw a clear pivot when you started dressing a little bit different. You started wearing different shirts that I never saw you wear before. I previously would see you in blazers and button downs the same way I did. And I call that a uniform. And now when I go to events, Sree, it's funny. Maybe they're looking at me different because I used to wear that uniform of the button down and the crisp blazer. Now I wear a jacket, t-shirt, jeans, and a pair of sneakers because I'm finally like, I'm not going to shrink for you. And I got to say, I forgot about that, but you played a role because at some point I was like, look at Sree leaning in. I'm not getting comfortable for you. I'm getting comfortable for me. Am I right with that?
You're absolutely right. Oh my God, you're bring up all these emotions because I once posted that I one day want to be able to wear orange shoes at work. Like, I saw somebody with some really cool sneakers and I said, I want to be able to do that. I didn't have the guts to do that. I was 22 when I started teaching at Columbia Journalism School, blessed to do that. I used to wear tweed jackets because that's the uniform that you needed to wear. Not only was I too young, I was too brown. I was, all these things that was very different from everybody else on the faculty. And I needed to do that. And then I was freed. I was freed one day, many years later, to be able to dress how I want and to do what I want. But this is not about me. This is about you, Antonio. You are awesome. I'm so grateful. I wish we had another hour of your time, but I know your babies need you. And I want you to give a shout out to your wife and your kids, because I know she has no time to watch this, but if she ever did, I want her to know that you talked about her here.
Yeah, I'm fortunate to have such a supportive wife. So shout out to my wife, Gigi, 4-year-old twins, August and Harper. Talk about that North Star while we're doing things. That's my North Star. And I can't thank you enough for having me. Hey, 88 shows. I'm excited for you to keep going, keep making the difference that you are, inspiring. How you do it all, I have no idea. And I know you have an amazing team you work with. So shout out to them as well for helping you do all that you do.
Thank you. And before we let you go, let's remind everyone to find out the Best Thing podcast. You just go to theantonioneves.com. And also, you can pre-order his book from January now, which is, I didn't know you could pre-order this early on Amazon, but check it out. It's called Don't Live Life on Autopilot, right? And so
stop living on autopilot.
Stop living on autopilot. I like that. Better title. And look at everybody saying, thank you. Thank you so much for this. And Anand's remembering my colorful dress for my TED Talk, he says. So you're not the only one who noticed. And Ashok says, love this show. And people are talking about this. I hope when you have a moment, we'll just go through the comments and just talk to people because they would love to hear from you. Everyone, that's Antonio Neves. Amazing man. He's the student teaching the professor. We'll let you go. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sree.
Bye-bye. And folks, thank you for watching. I'm so grateful to all of you for being here. A couple of quick notes. We have some amazing guests coming up in the next few days, including an African-American man who was wrongly convicted and is now out and will be talking to us about the things that he's trying to fix in the criminal justice system. We want to make sure you join us. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Sreenet. Please also email me if you have any questions or comments. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to share what we're doing and get your comments and your suggestions for guest speakers. We want to have more guest speakers, more opportunities to give people a voice. I also have this. Let me see if I can show this to you. This is my WhatsApp alert. It is not a group that you join, which might have some racists on there. This is just an alert system. Just point your camera at this. It's a QR code, and you can ask to join, and you'll get a very gentle alert every time I'm live. I'm so grateful to all of you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your support. Please email me and let me know how we can be of help to you. I want to remind you that we have a couple of sponsors that we're grateful for, and maybe you know someone who'd like to sponsor this show. And we want to thank Art & Co. Get involved, the world's largest online art auction fundraising for COVID-19 victims, artandco.net. And also tell you that I'm offering this free Fundamentals of Social Media workshop, free certification course, mrac.co/social, mrac.co/social. 3,500 people have signed up for this. Please sign up as well. Tell somebody to join. And then I have to do something, even though we're out of time, that I've been doing. We interviewed the amazing speaker and teacher, Kimberly Crenshaw, who coined the term intersectionality. And she said, say their name. She told me to say their name. So we're going to say their names first by looking at this cover of Time magazine, Titus Kaffir's cover of a mother with a child torn away. And you can see on the sides, she's put the names. And he was inspired by this photo of a young George Floyd with his mother, Larcenia Floyd. Just an incredible photograph. So sad, a photograph you don't see very often. The current cover of Time magazine. And I'm just going to read these names as I try to do justice to them. Thank you all for watching. Trayvon Martin, Yvette Smith, Eric Garner, Michael Brown, Laquan McDonald, Tanisha Anderson, Akai Gurley, Tamir Rice, Jermaine Reed, Natasha McKenna, Eric Harris, Walter Scott, Freddie Gray, William Chapman, Sandra Bland, Darius Stewart, Samuel Dubose, Janet Wilson, Kellen Rockmore, Alton Sterling, Philando Castile, Joseph Mann, Terrence Crutcher, Chad Robertson, Jordan Edwards, Aaron Bailey, Stefan Clark, Danny Ray Thomas, Antoine Rose, Botham Jean, Tatiana Jefferson, Michael Dean, Ahmad Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and you could keep going on that list, Emmett Till, and Amadou Diallo, and so many others. Thank you for your support. Thank you for being here. Thank you for everyone who has been out there talking about the issues of our day, and we wish you the very best. Thank you very much. We'll see you again. Please email me, Sree